The Habs have seemingly one major weakness in depth on their roster heading into the next couple of years, and that is right D. Yes, they have some solid guys like Savard, Kovacevic, and Justin Barron, but we're going to outline in this video a few potential targets that the Habs could go after this summer to help with that depth. You won't want to miss this edition of Habs Digest. Hello, bonjour, ahoy, and welcome to today's news edition of Habs Digest. I'm your host, Josh Gosse, alongside my co-host, Jesse Poirier. And guys, we're bringing it back. About 71% of you guys are not subscribed. I haven't flashed this in a while because a lot of you guys were hitting subscribe, but recently our videos have been going crazy. We really appreciate all the support, seriously. But if you're one of that 71% and you haven't hit that button, just do it now. We have tons of Habs content. We're going to have it the whole offseason, all in the next year, and we should be your number one source. All right, Jesse, let's just get talking. Let's look at some potential right defense targets for the Habs. Before we get into the actual guys we have lined up for this video, I wanted to get your thoughts. Do you think that right D really is a depth issue for Montreal? Because other than, we have guys like Kovacevic, Savard, Barron, and maybe Chris Weidman, but to me, out of all positions on the Montreal Canadiens, that might be the spot we really lack the top-end talent the most.
It is an issue, definitely. Like many teams in the NHL, that right defensive position is sometimes one that is kind of lacking a little bit. So we've seen a lot of rumors of late of even us maybe using our first pick that we have, our first selection that we have in the first round to go for a right D. Personally, I don't feel like we'll go in this direction, but you see why. It almost makes you think, maybe are we going to try and do that with our second pick in the first round? Kind of like how we're able to get Logan Mailloux, who is a right defenseman, obviously in a position that we really need, but you have to think that we want to address this in some way or another.
Yeah, when you look at the Habs depth chart through their actual roster and through prospects, it's extremely left D heavy. The only prospect that really is a right D that has any chance of playing the NHL right now is Mailloux. And while we love guys like Kovacevic and Barron, do they project to be long-term top four guys? Maybe. Barron, maybe more so than Kovacevic, but this is a topic that I think we want to talk about, at least now, at least in the short term, because maybe the Habs will trade some lefties for a right D, but let's look at some targets that the Habs can go after this offseason to fill that gap for the next maybe couple seasons, or just to help, educate and help train these young guys coming up. So the first guy I want to mention might be one that's a bit interesting to you guys, but that is Tyler Myers. Tyler Myers, while not a free agent this offseason, is on an expiring deal with Vancouver. He's a 33-year-old, 6'8", 230-pound right D-man. And we know, Jesse, one thing that the Habs right D lacks is, while Davis Savard is a very solid stay-at-home defenseman, the Habs don't really have that kind of physicality. And I feel like Tyler Myers, in the short term, if the Habs can maybe get Vancouver to make another poor managerial decision and give the Habs a pick along with Tyler Myers, I don't know, maybe I'm being too optimistic, but what do you think of Tyler Myers as a potential short-term option to kind of help be a leader in the room and to maybe help grow some of the Habs' defensive prospects?
Interesting. A little bit more of a physical type. I wonder if the Habs management kind of wants to go into that, or if that's maybe a regression on their thinking, right? Because of course you can't have every defenseman being that offensive sort of guy, right? But as you see with a lot of coaches, they like to do a pairing of having an offensive guy with the defensive sort of guy. So you're right that he might actually fit, maybe balancing off like a Mike Matheson or something like this, right? Having that size, I think we still need a little bit of that experience. I think you're bringing up a great point, Josh. We have a lot of young guys, but you need to insulate them a little bit. You need to leave enough room for the young guys to develop, but you also need somebody to mentor them there as well. So I think we definitely got spot for one more experience defenseman, and it's not a bad selection. Obviously, while not having the greatest production this year, only
that's
one
putting
goal,
it lightly.
16 assists. Obviously, Vancouver didn't have the best year going, minus 16 on the plus or minus and everything else. But at the same time, I think we're trying to bide a little bit of time. We know that Hutson's coming soon. We know that Mailloux's coming soon, so we just kind of need some placeholders, a little bit of experience in the meantime.
Yeah, and I think experience is a good thing. And again, just to have that depth on right D. And one thing that Montreal, like we said, struggled with was really getting the puck out of the zone and intimidating other players who come into their zone. Our forwards are big and they hit. Our defensemen, not so much, other than someone like Arber Xhekaj, who again missed half the season, and his role on this team, to some, might be questionable. Will he even crack the top six? I think he will, but there's a lot of good defensemen in the Montreal system. So anyway, Tyler Myers is the first option, and we're going to stay on a similar vein with this next guy, who is a free agent Montreal could go sign, but we're not sure how much he might cost. Now, there have been rumors in the past that John Klingberg has been linked to Montreal. I think he would like playing in Montreal. The problem is, how much would they have to pay him? Right, he just got traded halfway through the season at the deadline to the Minnesota Wild and helped them out, helped run a bit of their power play as the season went on. And right now, Montreal's number one power play guy, at least on D, is Mike Matheson. They've been messing around with some 5-forward lineups. Do you think Klingberg could be a guy that Montreal signs? He's only 30 years old, for like a couple of years as more of an offensive scoring defenseman to pair with Mike Matheson to sort of run that second power play? Or do you think that he's just really not a great fit to sign in the short term?
He might be more of a player that we're looking for an offensive standpoint. You know, obviously we want to improve on our power play, but it's a great point, Josh, that we're obviously not looking to break the bank. Like, for next year, we're looking to be better. We're looking to step up, but I don't think next year that we're trying to make that jump into our contention window, nor should we. I think we should be patient. Even if we're getting a better draft pick next year, more middle round, while still kind of developing, I think we still need to be patient. I'm all for really rebuilding next year still, and then that next year really taking that big jump. But at the same time, John Klingberg, 19 points in 17 games. He wasn't there for much of last year, but pretty effective for the time that he was there. All the same, that being said, definitely a little bit hesitant bringing somebody in who is just coming off of, a severe injury. We know with the Habs last year, that's something that we battle a lot of man games lost. So anybody that we're looking to bring in, I feel like we're going to want to make sure that they have a clean bill of health. We know that injuries definitely do happen, and it's going to happen from time to time. So I don't think that should be a total disclaimer off of him completely. But yeah, he could be an interesting fit for us in the short term.
Yeah, I think so too. And again, I think if the Habs are going to go after some kind of right D this offseason, I don't think it should be a long-term guy, just simply because, again, there's so much uncertainty with a lot of their defensive prospects, and I think some of them are going to have to be moved, whether it's someone like Harris. I don't think they're going to move Hutson, but again, there's such a backlog that eventually guys are going to have to get moved, and they'll find another way, like you said, whether it's through the draft or through a trade, to find another right D. So these guys, I think, are good to fill out the depth, to help mentor the young guys, and Myers and Klingberg, I think, kind of fit that bill, maybe more so than these next couple of guys we're going to talk about. And this one here that we're going to talk about, Jesse, I don't think a lot of Habs fans are going to be happy with it. He's one of the most hated players in the NHL, definitely by Habs fans for some of the shenanigans he pulled against us this year. That's Radko Gudas, and as much as you guys might hate him, he's an effective enforcer. He gets suspended all the time. He's straight up, I'm just going to call him a dirty player, but he is effective at scaring opponents who come into the offensive zone. And he's that kind of presence that Montreal kind of lacks on the defensive end right now. I don't know if we're going to spend too much time talking about Mr. Radko Gudas, Jesse, but what are your thoughts on him potentially coming to Montreal, or is he just a straight-up no-go on your list?
He's just a straight-up no-go, Josh, for Radko, because he just doesn't fit the culture of our team,
Good
right,
point.
of what we're trying to build. We kind of have like this positive environment, great in the locker room, Marty St. Louis, really trying to build just an environment where people just love showing up to work every day. At the same time, it's one of those players, right, where you hate to play against him, but you might feel differently if he is on your team. And obviously he's been serving the team that he's on right now pretty well with the Florida Panthers and everything else. But at the same time, I just don't really feel like he fits the type of player that we need. Culture is so important, your environment, what you're trying to build up. Really getting that respect around the league. So for me, at this point in time, I would definitely have to pass on Radko Gudas.
Yeah, I agree. And again, while he's a free agent, he probably won't demand that much money and could fill a need for Montreal. I just think there's enough negatives about him to just say, like, why would we bring this guy in, right? Like you said, doesn't fit the culture. He would be a short-term replacement if you did sign him, just to have that physical presence to maybe steer this team in a different direction. But no, I agree with you, Jesse. He was brought up, again, I should mention that all these guys were brought up in an article by Mark Dumont. I forgot to mention that at the top of the video. I'll link his article in the description. He mentioned some right D. Actually, he didn't mention Tyler Myers, brought that up ourselves, but these guys are all mentioned by him, so give him the credit he deserves. Go click the article in the description because, again, great writer from Montreal. So, yeah, as we mentioned that, we're going to move on to the last guy. Another guy he mentioned, and a guy that I think is a bit interesting, Jesse. Maybe my favorite on this list, and that's Damon Severson. I'm a big Damon Severson guy when he was with the New Jersey Devils, and he's just coming off his 6-year contract with the Devils. Solid production. I mean, you see a 46-point-year, 39, 33 just last year. He's always hovering between, 7 and 11 goals. He's a really, really good player. Seems to have a very clean bill of health. He was on them playing pretty well in the playoffs, and he's only 28 years old. The big problem I see with Damon Severson, Jesse, is that he's probably looking for a fairly long-term contract at the age of 28, trying to secure that bag for the rest of his career, and I'm just not so sure that Montreal is in a position to give a guy of his caliber and his age that kind of contract.
We're not, because we still have some bad contracts on the book right now, and we see that we're trying to clear those out. We know which ones these are. Obviously, Hoffman, Armia. People have varying thoughts on Gallagher's contract as well. But this is kind of what's handcuffing us right now, is because you could very well say, hey, let's get a really good right-handed defenseman, because our forward core is still so young in so many ways. It's going to take them some time to kind of develop. So at least let's just shore up this part of ourselves. And you got to feel like there's some part of Montreal's management that would feel this way. However, it's just some of those contracts. Once we get those off of the books next season, I feel like this all flows really well of when we're going to be getting a lot of bad contracts off the books. And when just naturally as a team, how we've positioned ourselves to really succeed and then kind of challenge for a playoff spot is actually happening at the perfect time. So I don't see that big right-handed defenseman signing this offseason, but potentially more next offseason, but you never really know.
Yeah, it's a very interesting proposal, and we want to hear from you guys. Do you guys think any of these guys could be a solid potential fit for Montreal, whether it be short-term or long-term? Let us know, because there's a lot of interesting possibilities. Do you even think Montreal needs another right D, or are you happy with the core of David Savard, Jonathan Kovacevic, and Justin Barron, with maybe Logan Mailloux in a year's time and Chris Weidman being that extra guy? Let us know, because we want to hear from you. Very interesting stuff, but in the meantime, that'll do it for this news edition of Habs Digest. If you enjoyed, leave a like, comment, subscribe to the channel. We're well on our way to 6,000 subs. We really, really appreciate the support, guys, and we hope it continues long into the future. I'm Josh Goss for my co-host, Jesse Poirier. We'll catch you in the next one.